Harry Potter stood in the middle of the Hogwarts library, the lamplight reflecting off his round glasses. Sheltered by the tall shelves filled with centuries of knowledge, he, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger hunched over a desk piled high with cracked tomes. The air around them felt almost electric. Something was different tonight. They had spent many restless evenings researching old spells and reading about magical relics, but never before had they come across anything like this. A single, dusty volume lay open before them, titled Chronomancy and the Lost Civilizations. The spine creaked when Hermione had pried it open, and inside, an illustration had caught her eye. A swirling portal of sand and stars, said to transport travelers back to an era long forgotten. According to the text, it was used by an ancient wizard civilization known as Auroras, a people rumored to be even older than the founders of Hogwarts themselves. Hermione, ever the scholar, spoke in hushed tones. If this text is right, the Auroras learned to manipulate time in a way we've never seen. Well, not since the existence of time-turners, anyway. Ron peered at the illustration, his expression a mix of fascination and dread. Blimey, I thought time-turners were dangerous enough, but this, traveling centuries, maybe millennia into the past? That's mental. Harry rested a hand on the yellowed page. He felt an odd tug, as though something inside the book were alive, beckoning him. His scar prickled slightly. It's not just centuries, he said. The book talks about a veil between time. It mentions a lost rift that leads to a realm outside standard magical chronology. A civilization that supposedly disappeared, or at least stopped interacting with the rest of the wizarding world. Hermione nodded, her eyes alight with curiosity. They're said to have built an entire city, Orandara, where magic was practiced with a skill that's never been replicated. The Auroras specialized in chronomancy, bridging timelines as easily as we cast lumos. Ron fidgeted. And you want to see if it's real? I mean, it's got to be dangerous. Harry flashed a small grin. Danger never stopped us before. The trio stayed up until dawn, devouring every snippet of text about the Auroras, Orandara, and the rumored time rift. By sunrise, they decided to leave Hogwarts for a secret expedition. Hermione insisted on thorough planning, but Harry and Ron suspected that no matter how much they prepared, stepping into the unknown would carry 1,000 risks. Little did they know, the library's shadows were not empty. A pair of keen, watchful eyes glinted from behind a tall shelf. Someone else was listening. Someone who would stop at nothing to seize the secrets of the ancient civilization for themselves. A week later, after classes and homework gave them a spare moment, the three friends slipped out of Hogwarts. Beneath the moon's pale glow, they hurried to an old clearing beyond the grounds. Thanks to Hermione's research, they'd pinpointed a location with unusual magical residue, an anomaly that might be linked to chronomantic spells. The clearing was ringed by ancient stones, each etched with cryptic runes that had long been overlooked by the wizarding world. Hermione set down a battered old trunk, from which she produced several items. A wand-holding contraption she'd fashioned, an hourglass wrapped in dragonhide, and a scrap of parchment inscribed with archaic runes. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the faint scent of pine and the possibility of adventure. Harry and Ron helped arrange the stones in a specific pattern around them. The entire arrangement looked almost like a Stonehenge for wizards, with an added dash of precarious experimentation. Following the instructions from Chronomancy and the Lost Civilizations, Hermione began the chant. She spoke in a language that Harry and Ron didn't recognize, a melodic string of syllables that seemed to reverberate in their chests. As Hermione's voice rose, the runes on the stones flared to life, glowing gold. All at once, the hourglass she held turned violently on its own. Sand spilled from top to bottom in a swirl of shimmering grains. A low hum filled the clearing, like 1,000 voices whispering at the edge of hearing. Harry's heart pounded. The air felt as though it were charged with the raw essence of time itself. There was a bright flash, a ripping sensation in the atmosphere, and then darkness. For a split second, Harry thought they'd all been knocked unconscious. But then he felt ground under his feet. Slowly, the world came back into focus. Daybreak sun, the fresh scent of rain, and an entire landscape he'd never seen before. The circle of stones remained, but now they were new. No moss, no weathering, the carvings crisp. Instead of the slightly overgrown Hogwarts grounds, they found themselves standing on a sprawling plain, dotted with curious structures of tinted glass and white stone. Ron spun around, wide-eyed. Where on earth? Hermione exhaled, chest heaving from the magical exertion. I think we're in Orandara. As the sun rose over this strange land, it revealed what could only be described as a city carved by magic itself. Towering spires of marble soared overhead, joined by skywalks that shimmered with a translucent film of enchantment. Buildings sprang from the earth, each decorated with runes that danced across surfaces like living murals. Somewhere in the distance, waterfalls cascaded in gentle arcs, flowing uphill as often as they did down. Evidence of advanced wizardry in every corner of this reality. Harry stepped forward and felt a tingling sensation underfoot. The ground beneath him was laced with lines of light, reminiscent of ley lines, pulsing faintly with energy. A hush fell among the trio, a reverent moment to acknowledge the marvel before them. History was alive here, and they had become part of it. Before they could venture further, a group of robed figures approached at a brisk pace. Each wore ornate attire in shimmering blues and golds, bearing tall staves reminiscent of scepters. Their eyes glowed softly, as if channeling some internal reservoir of magic. The tallest figure, an elder with silver hair braided into intricate patterns, stepped forward. "Strangers," he said in a formal, resonant voice, "you stand on the threshold of Orandara, seat of the Auroras. State your purpose." Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged glances. No one had fully prepared for a direct confrontation. Finally, Hermione swallowed and spoke. "We come as students of magic from a distant place, and perhaps a different time. We only wish to learn." The elder's gaze swept over them. It held neither hostility nor easy trust, but rather a measured curiosity. Then he nodded for them to follow. "The council shall decide your fates. Take care. Our city is wondrous, but it is not without its dangers." They were led through arches covered in glowing script, wards and protective seals, Hermione guessed, and into the bustling heart of Orandara. Everywhere they looked, ancient witches and wizards shaped magic in ways the trio had never seen. Illusions that took physical form, potions stirred by swirling orbs of light, and levitated gardens bursting with plants that had disappeared from the future world. The council met in a grand chamber shaped like a half-moon. A mosaic of interlocking runes covered the domed ceiling, telling the story of how the Auroras rose to power by mastering chronomancy. 9 counselors sat in tall chairs, each wearing a distinct color that seemed to represent a different magical discipline. Time, elemental forces, healing, illusions, enchantments, and more. The silver-haired elder stood at the center dais. "These travelers claim they come from another time," he announced. "Tell us, travelers, how is this possible?" Harry stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "We found an account of your civilization in our time. We followed instructions from an ancient text, probably from this very era, to open a rift through time. We didn't mean any harm. We only want to understand." He could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him. One of the counselors, a middle-aged witch with deep violet eyes, regarded them sternly. "Knowledge of chronomancy is forbidden outside our circle. If you indeed traveled through time, you risk tearing the fabric that binds our world." "Who taught you these spells?" Hermione tensed. "We found them in a book in our future. We believed it important to learn about our magical past. With all due respect, it seems you intended someone to find your instructions one day." Murmurs rippled through the council. Another member, a kindly old wizard with sky-blue robes, spoke calmly. "We have foreseen visitors from another age. Prophecy always said there would be those who come searching for the cradle of magic. If these 3 speak truly, they may be the ones we have anticipated." The silver-haired elder lifted his staff. A gentle wave of magic passed over Harry, Ron, and Hermione, like a detection spell, confirming their sincerity. "I sense no treachery in them," he announced. "Let it be known. These travelers shall be granted temporary passage through Orindara under watch. They must not violate our sacred laws, nor speak of our secrets to unworthy ears." A sense of relief washed over Harry. For now, they had a chance to explore and learn, albeit under close scrutiny. The council dismissed them, instructing a robed attendant named Xandera, an apprentice chronomancer with golden runes embroidered on her sleeves, to guide them through the city. In the days that followed, Harry, Ron, and Hermione explored Orindara's towering structures and labyrinthine passageways. With Xandera leading the way, they witnessed feats of magic that felt impossible, even by modern wizarding standards. They saw horticultural labs where plants were bred to thrive in zero-gravity bubbles. They witnessed blacksmiths forging swords that shimmered in and out of visibility. Their awe only deepened when they toured the city's central library, an immense repository of ancient scrolls and codices, stored in rotating shelves that responded to thought commands. One wing was dedicated entirely to the study of time magic, from basic temporal manipulation to complex theories on rewriting fate. Hermione's eyes shone as she pored over these scrolls, each detailing spells more advanced than any time-turner. However, the deeper they dug into Orindara's secrets, the more they sensed an undercurrent of tension. While many city inhabitants greeted them warmly, intrigued by these newcomers, others seemed openly suspicious. Whispers trailed them in corridors. Burly guards, clad in enchanted armor, sometimes appeared at the edges of their vision, always watchful. One afternoon, as they walked along the skywalk connecting two massive spires, Hermione confided her growing concerns. These people wield unimaginable power. Their civilization is unlike anything we know in modern times. But there must be a reason they're lost to history. Ron peered over the edge of the skywalk, marveling at a magical orchard far below. Trees glimmered under shimmering nets of protective spells, growing bright blue fruit. "Maybe they destroyed themselves?" he muttered, feeling a faint chill. "I mean, look at all of this. It's so advanced that it makes me uneasy. If they became obsessed with controlling time, that can't end well." Harry nodded solemnly. "Hermione, have you figured out if we can even get home? I mean, I don't fancy being stuck here forever." Hermione produced the dragon hide-bound hourglass. "I'm working on it. The rift we created isn't permanent. We'll need an immense source of chronomantic energy to open another portal back to our time. We'll probably need help from the council." Before they could continue the conversation, they heard a voice behind them. Xandera stood there, arms folded, a serious look on her face. "I can help you," she said quietly. "But first you need to understand the darkness at Orindara's core." The young apprentice glanced around to be sure no one was listening. Her voice was hushed, urgent. "There's a group within the council, led by the Violet counselor you met, who believes that we should cleanse our timeline by removing any future threats preemptively. They think controlling time is a right, not a privilege. Rumor has it, they're planning to harness energy from a hidden chronovault beneath the city to rewrite entire events in the future, wiping out any magical lineage they deem impure." Harry's heart lurched. He'd seen fanatical wizards before. "So they'd basically play gods?" Xandera nodded grimly. "Exactly. And if they learn your world allowed half-bloods, muggle-borns, and the entire tapestry of wizarding society to coexist, they might see that as justification to erase your timeline altogether." Hermione's face went pale. "That's monstrous. And they'll be looking for you," Xandera added. "They'll want to know exactly how advanced the future's magic is, and if you'll stand in their way." Ron let out a low whistle. "We've got to warn the rest of the council. We can't let them do that. This is bigger than just us trying to get home. They can't be allowed to destroy the future." Armed with Xandera's warning, they hurried back to the council's chamber, only to find it empty. Moonlight streamed through crystal windows, illuminating vacant seats. A single guard stood by the entrance, insisting the council was in private session, uninterruptible. Suspicion clawed at Harry's gut. What if part of the council was already moving ahead with their plan? Xandera led them through the back corridors of the palace. She claimed she knew a hidden route into the depths of Orindara. They would sneak into the Chronovault, gather evidence of the plot, and bring it to the more reasonable members of the council. The passage sloped downward, lit by glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The air grew stale and cold. Magic, ancient and powerful, charged the darkness around them. They emerged into a vast cavern dotted with massive hourglasses, each large enough to hold an ocean of sand. Platforms floated in midair, tethered by shimmering gold filaments. At the center stood a monolithic arch, reminiscent of the veil at the Department of Mysteries, only grander and humming with raw potential. "That arch is the Chronovault," Xandera whispered, pointing to the swirling patterns etched into its surface. "It's said to be the source of Orindara's mastery over time. The council can siphon its energy to manipulate entire epochs." Before they could move, they heard voices echoing against the cavern walls. Pressing themselves behind a column, they spotted the Violet Counselor accompanied by several robed figures. The tall wizard's voice carried an unsettling confidence. "Tonight, we harness the full might of the Chronovault," he declared. "We shall reshape the future, ensuring only the pure of blood and mind are allowed to flourish. Think of it, no more threats from Muggle-born chaos. We cleanse the timeline of mediocrity." Hermione clenched her fists. She had endured the prejudice of pure-blood supremacy before, but never at such a colossal scale. Harry's mind flashed back to his battles against Voldemort and the Death Eaters. Could it be that prejudice and hunger for power existed in every era, even one as glorious as Orindara? Ron's eyes darted about. "What do? We can't just barge in. There's too many of them." Xandera bit her lip. "We need to disrupt their spell or at least warn the rest of the council. But I can't open a citywide telepathic alert from here. They control those wards." Harry took a deep breath. "What if we sabotage whatever ritual they're about to perform? If we can't alert the others, maybe we can prevent them from completing the spell." Hermione hesitated. Tampering with chronomancy could be catastrophic. If we break something in the Chronovault, we might tear the timeline ourselves. Is there another way? Before Xandera could reply, alarm bells tolled through the cavern. The Violet Counselor spun around. "Intruders!" he shouted. A ripple of magic swept across the chamber, revealing the trio's hiding place behind the column. Ron ducked as a bolt of violet energy sizzled past his ear. Harry conjured a shield charm, while Hermione fired a stupefy at the nearest robed figure. Xandera leapt into the fray, staff swinging in wide arcs, weaving protective wards as they advanced. In the chaos, the Violet Counselor and his accomplices dashed toward the arch. They had begun chanting a complex incantation. Its resonance made Harry's insides churn, as if reality itself were shifting. The arch shimmered, a swirl of sand forming in its center. Slowly, an opening materialized, showing flickers of scenes. Battlefields, cities in ruin, farmland, Hogwarts in another era. "They're calling forth a direct link to the future timeline," Hermione shouted. "They might be planning to alter it from here." Harry's scar prickled fiercely. He dashed forward, wand at the ready, determined to stop them. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. Bolts of multicolored light whizzed by. Ron was grappling with one of the robed figures, wrestling his staff away. Hermione fought two wizards at once, her spells woven with desperation. Xandera found herself locked in a magical duel with the Violet Counselor, beams of violet and gold colliding in midair. Finally, Harry managed to get close enough to thrust his wand toward the arch, summoning every ounce of magical will. He bellowed, "Finite incantatum!" An explosive recoil of energy rocketed through the cavern, throwing Harry backwards. Sand from the giant hourglasses spilled, swirling into a raging vortex around the Chronovault. For a moment, it seemed the swirl of sand turned to molten glass, warping the air in a nauseating blur. Hermione rushed to Harry's side, helping him up. "We need to close it, or it'll tear the entire timeline apart." Over the roar of magic, they heard the Violet Counselor shout, "Stop them!" But his own ritual was unraveling too. The swirling portal sparked erratically. Lightning-like arcs danced through the air. The robed figures, too, seemed panicked. Desperate, Zandera launched her staff like a spear toward a giant keystone set at the top of the arch. The staff glowed bright gold for a split second, then shattered the keystone in a burst of raw power. Instantly, a deafening crack split the chamber. The swirling sand collapsed in on itself, and the arch splintered. Shards of stone rained down. A torrent of strange energies whipped around the cavern, flattening everyone to the ground. Then silence. When the dust settled, the chronovault stood inert, its arch broken. The robed figures were sprawled across the cavern floor, unconscious or groaning in pain. The Violet Counselor, pinned by a fallen piece of debris, glared at Harry and his friends. But his eyes held something else, fear. In the aftermath, the rest of the council arrived, alerted by the swirl of magical disturbance. They stared in shock at the ruined chronovault. At first, voices rose in anger, demanding to know who had committed such a sacrilege. But as the story unfolded, the plot to alter the future, the sabotage that saved countless lives, many counselors fell silent in grim recognition. The silver-haired elder knelt by the shattered arch, shaking his head. The chronovault was the centerpiece of our civilization. We used it carefully, but apparently not carefully enough to guard it against ambition. He turned to Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Zandera. You four may have just saved far more than this city. Yet in doing so, you have changed. The elder's expression was sad but resolute. There is no apology needed. Our arrogance brought us to the brink. Perhaps this is the destiny of our people, that we cannot keep such power without it consuming us. Even now, we must decide how to move forward in a world without the chronovault. Harry glanced at Ron and Hermione. As mesmerizing as Orindara had been, it was easy to see that the civilization's downfall was seeded by their own greed for absolute control over time. Perhaps this moment marked the beginning of Orindara's end, the very reason it vanished from history. As if on cue, Hermione whispered, "This might be the turning point that ensures Orindara fades from existence as a major influence. By losing the chronovault, they lose their greatest weapon, and maybe that leads them to seal themselves off from the rest of wizardkind. That's why they become legend." Ron sighed. So we always wondered how an entire civilization just disappears. Well, maybe they're choosing it to protect the future. The elder overheard. We will find a way to protect our people, but it may involve retreating from the timelines to ensure no further harm is done. However, he added softly, the three of you do not belong here. We must send you back. Harry exchanged a look with Hermione. We don't have the chronovault to power a return portal. How can we? Zandera stepped forward, fishing out the shattered remains of her staff. We still have a chance. The original time rift you used may be reinvigorated with what's left of the chronovault's raw energy. If we act swiftly, we can reopen your path home. The silver-haired elder nodded. We shall conduct one final ritual, here in the presence of the broken chronovault. Then we will let the rift seal forever. Under the moonlit roof of the cavern, the surviving counselors formed a circle around Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Zandera. Each counselor raised their staff, chanting in unison. The air shimmered with blue and gold motes of light. The hourglass Hermione clung to trembled in her hands, and its sand started to flow backward. A faint portal flickered at the center of the circle, hazy at first, but gradually solidifying. Scenes of Hogwarts at dawn glimmered on the other side. Harry's pulse quickened. He recognized the astronomy tower, the outline of the forbidden forest in the distance. Zandera stepped up to them, tears gathering in her eyes. Thank you, travelers. You showed me that the future deserves its own path, not one dictated by fear. She glanced at the ruined chronovault. Perhaps one day, our city will be remembered not for its downfall, but for the lesson it taught. Hermione's voice was thick with emotion. I wish we could stay longer, learn more, but we can't risk any further damage to the timeline. Ron patted Zandera on the shoulder. You'll do fine, mate. Just keep watch and maybe keep those megalomaniacs in check. Yeah. Harry stepped forward, clasping Xandera's hand. "We owe you. Without your help, the future might have been lost." The elder lifted his staff one last time. "Go now. The portal closes soon, and with it, the doors between our times." The trio shared one final glance at Orindara, this breathtaking city on the edge of oblivion, then stepped into the swirling portal. Wind whipped around them. A kaleidoscope of light and shadow stretched and compressed their senses. It felt as though they were being squeezed through the very threads of reality. A moment later, they staggered onto soft grass under the pale sunrise. They were back in the same clearing beyond Hogwarts. The ancient stones were silent sentinels once more, their runes weathered and faint. Around them, the world felt reassuringly normal. Birds chirped in the distance. The scent of dew-laden grass filled their lungs. Slowly, the portal behind them flickered and vanished, leaving nothing but a faint shimmer in the air. Hermione's hourglass was empty, the last grain of sand resting at the bottom. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Ron let out a shaky breath. "We made it. Are we sure it's our time?" Hermione looked toward Hogwarts' familiar silhouette. "Yes, this is it, the timeline we know." She offered a weary, grateful smile. "And I don't sense any major paradox rifts swallowing us whole, so I think we're okay." Harry gazed back at the clearing. "Orindara is gone for good. Maybe it's best it stayed in the past. Some powers are too dangerous for wizards to wield." Ron nodded. "At least we gave them a chance to do the right thing. If they vanish from history, maybe it's because they chose to ensure no one would ever replicate their mistakes." Hermione tucked the battered old trunk under her arm. "We should probably keep quiet about this. The future doesn't need more reasons to meddle with time." As they trudged back to the castle, exhausted but alive, they each carried a quiet, profound respect for the ancient Auroras. It was a civilization that soared higher than any other, only to learn that meddling with time demanded an impossible price. Outside the gates of Hogwarts, the morning sun illuminated the old stone walls in a gentle glow, as though the castle were welcoming them home. Together, they walked through the entrance, sharing secret smiles and silent gratitude. They had unraveled the mystery of a lost era, faced wizards who would shape or shatter the future, and lived to tell the tale, if only in whispers among themselves. And somewhere, in the echoes of forgotten history, Orindara might still stand, an enigma to most, a cautionary lesson to those who learn its story. No record would exist in the modern wizarding libraries, and perhaps no wizard living would ever speak its name. But Harry, Ron, and Hermione would remember. They had witnessed it with their own eyes, the cradle of chronomancy, both terrible and beautiful, and learned that the greatest gift wizards could bestow upon time was to let it be.